I am Katherine Blake, 65 years old, a retired nurse who still has the habit of observing and analyzing every little detail in life. I thought my later years would be peaceful, tending to my small garden in the backyard, reading books in the golden afternoon light, and most importantly waiting for the day to hold my first grandchild. My son, Nathan Blake, 38, is my pride and joy. He's the type of man who works tirelessly, 12 hours a day, never complaining, just to provide a better life for his family. He trusts his wife, Ava Richards, a young, beautiful woman with a radiant smile and a sweet voice. But there's one thing I know better than anyone else. Not every smile is genuine. The day Ava gave birth, I was filled with joy upon hearing the news from Nathan. "Mom, Connor has arrived." I thought this would be a new chapter in my life, a chapter of joy, of continuation. But when I called to ask when I could visit the hospital, Ava cut me off with a sugary sweet tone. "We only want special people to be here today, Mom Katherine. I hope you understand." I was stunned. 38 years raising Nathan, enduring every hardship alongside him, and yet I wasn't considered special for the most important moment in his life. In the following days, I clung to social media to get a glimpse of my grandson. Ava didn't hold back in posting picture after picture. Connor in the arms of her mother, Connor smiling with her sister, Connor peacefully sleeping in the arms of their friends. And most notably, Connor was being held by Liam Archer, Nathan's best friend. In one particular photo, Liam was holding Connor like he had been doing it for months. No awkwardness, no hesitation, just pure familiarity. One small detail made my heart tighten. Liam's hand, resting on Connor's back, was far too natural. It was the way a father holds his child. Beneath the photo, Marcus, Ava's cousin, commented, "This little guy looks exactly like me, must run in the family." I looked closely. No, Connor didn't look like Nathan. He didn't look like Ava either. This child bore features I recognized, features I had only seen on Liam Archer's face. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My nursing instincts, my mother's instincts, told me something awful was being hidden. And I, Katherine Blake, would never allow the truth to stay buried. The moment I saw those photos, something inside me clicked. It wasn't just the way Liam held Connor or the comment from Marcus. It was the gut feeling that wouldn't let me go. I knew something wasn't right, but I needed proof. I couldn't just accuse anyone without facts, not with my son's life and future on the line. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at my phone. The pictures of Connor were still fresh in my mind. The way Liam's hands seemed to belong around my grandson, the way he looked at him like a father would. My heart was torn between my love for Nathan and my growing concern that everything I thought I knew about our family was about to come crashing down. I spent hours researching genetic traits and blood types. I had to know more. After all, I was a nurse. I spent decades studying medical charts, understanding people's health, and knowing what to look for when things didn't seem right. Ava had told Nathan that Connor's blood type was O positive, the same as hers. But there was something in that detail that didn't sit well with me. I remember Nathan telling me, a few years ago, that his father had an AB negative blood type. That meant, if Connor was truly his son, his blood type couldn't possibly be O positive. It wasn't just a hunch, it was science. By the end of the week, I decided I needed to act. I reached out to a trusted colleague from my nursing days and arranged a quiet blood test for Connor. I didn't want to scare anyone, so I told Ava I was simply being cautious and doing a little extra checkup for the baby. She didn't question it, probably thinking I was just being my usual overprotective self. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to unfold. I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but it was hard to wait. I kept telling myself to stay patient, But every time I saw those pictures of Liam holding my grandson, I grew more and more restless. Then came the day the blood test results arrived. I had arranged for them to be sent directly to me. It wasn't unusual for me to access medical records given my background. The moment I opened the envelope, my heart skipped a beat. Connor's blood type was AB positive. That was impossible. Nathan's blood type was a positive, and Ava's was O positive. There was no way their child could be AB positive unless something was wrong. I didn't need to be a medical expert to know what this meant. It wasn't just a simple error, it was a sign that Connor wasn't Nathan's child. I couldn't believe it at first. The realization felt like a slap across the face. The child Nathan had been doting on, the one he had been convinced was his own flesh and blood, wasn't his at all. I knew I had to confront Nathan, but I also knew it wasn't going to be easy. How do you tell your son that his wife had been lying to him for months, that the child he had been raising wasn't his? How do you tell a man that his whole world was built on lies? I decided to gather more evidence before speaking to Nathan. The blood test was one thing, but I needed more, so I continued my quiet investigation. I paid attention to the small details, Ava's phone calls, Liam's frequent visits, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching, the subtle but undeniable tension in their interactions. One afternoon, I overheard Ava on the phone. I was standing just outside the kitchen, and I couldn't help but listen in. "No, you can't come here. He's already suspicious. You need to be careful, Tyler. I'm not ready for him to find out yet." Tyler, that name sent a shock through my system. It wasn't the first time I had heard Ava mention him. In fact, every time I asked Ava about Liam, she'd quickly change the subject or deflect. But now I knew. Liam wasn't just a family friend. He was more than that. It was starting to make sense. Liam wasn't just an innocent bystander in this mess, he was a part of it. I couldn't let it go. I needed to confront Ava and Liam, but I also needed to be sure, one more step. I planned a trip to the hospital, pretending it was just a routine visit. I knew Ava was due for a checkup, and I wasn't going to let her out of my sight. I was going to catch them in the act, but fate had another plan. The very next day, I got a call from Nathan. "Mom, something's wrong. The apartment flooded. Can we come stay with you for a few days?" My heart dropped. I had been waiting for the perfect moment to confront Ava, but now Nathan was coming to stay with me, and I needed to be ready. I told myself I had to act fast. I couldn't let Nathan live in this lie any longer, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to protect my son and my grandson. The day Nathan arrived was surreal. He walked into my house, looking disheveled and stressed from dealing with the flood at his apartment. He had Connor in his arms, his face tight with worry, but there was something else in his eyes, too, an unspoken weight that had been building up for weeks. "Mom, I'm sorry about this. We weren't expecting the flood, but I didn't know where else to go," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. I stood there in the doorway, forcing myself to smile. "It's fine, Nathan. You know you're always welcome here." But as I looked at him, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. He had no idea the storm that was about to hit him. I watched as he settled down on the couch, Connor asleep in his arms. I knew that this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I would reveal the truth. But first, I had to be careful. I had to make sure Nathan was ready to hear it. Over the course of the evening, Nathan talked about the flood, the stress of his job, and his attempts to make everything perfect for Ava. As he spoke, I kept glancing at the baby in his arms, the little boy he had thought was his. The realization that Connor wasn't his was still fresh in my mind, but I could see the love Nathan had for the child. How could I take that away from him? That night, after dinner, I sat next to him on the couch, staring at the picture of our family that hung on the wall. It felt like a lifetime ago that I had taken that photo, when everything had seemed perfect. I knew I couldn't avoid this any longer. "Nathan, I need to talk to you about something," I said, my voice steady but full of the weight of what I had to say. He turned to me, his brow furrowed. "What's going on, Mom? Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "No, Nathan, everything is not okay." He looked at me, clearly confused. "What do you mean?" I glanced at Connor, still peacefully asleep in his arms, and my heart broke. "I've been watching closely, and something isn't right. Nathan, I think you've been lied to." His expression changed instantly, his eyes widening. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" "Connor, he's not your son." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Nathan blinked, his face hardening as he processed what I had said. His lips parted, but no sound came out. I continued, my voice shaking with emotion but firm in its resolve. "I know this is hard to believe, but I have proof. I had a blood test done, and Connor's blood type doesn't match yours. It can't possibly be your son." Nathan's face drained of color. What? What do you mean it doesn't match?" His voice was barely a whisper. I pulled out the envelope with the test results. "Connor's blood type is AB positive. Yours is a positive. Ava's is O positive. There's no way he can be your son." Nathan stared at the paper in disbelief. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment as he processed what I had just told him. His hands trembled as he looked at the test results, and for the first time in all our years together, I saw true fear in his eyes. I don't understand," he stammered. "Are you sure this can't be real?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm sorry, Nathan, but I am sure. I wouldn't lie to you about this. Ava has been lying to you for months." He sank back into the couch, his hands clutching the paper like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "No, this can't be happening. Ava would never do this. She loves me, Katherine. She loves me, and she's my wife." I put a hand on his shoulder, trying to comfort him. "I know this is hard to hear, but I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't certain. I've seen the way Ava has been acting, Nathan. The secretive phone calls, the way she and Liam interact. It all adds up. I know it's hard, but you need to face the truth." He shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "Ava would never. She promised me. She promised us." I could see the internal struggle tearing him apart. I knew he wanted to believe Ava. He had built his life around her, around this family they were supposed to have together. But now, it was all coming apart at the seams. I stood up, pacing the room as I fought to keep my emotions in check. "Nathan, I know this is painful, but you have to confront her. I'm not the one who's going to tear your life apart, but you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know who your son really is and who is behind all this." He stared at the test results again, his fingers twitching as if he wanted to crumple them up but couldn't. "But what does this mean? If Connor isn't mine, then who's his father?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew the answer, but I couldn't say it just yet, not until Nathan was ready to hear it. "I think you already know," I said quietly. Nathan's face went pale. "Liam," I nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm afraid so." The room seemed to close in on us, and for a moment there was only silence. Then Nathan let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He clutched his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. How could they do this to me?" The pain in his voice shattered me. I knew how much he had loved Ava, how much he had trusted her, and now everything was falling apart. The doorbell rang suddenly, and we both jumped. Nathan wiped his eyes and stood up quickly, his face full of confusion and rage. I could feel the tension in the air as we both walked to the door. When I opened it, there stood Ava, her eyes wide with shock, her hand gripping her purse tightly. Before I could say anything, she stepped inside, her voice too calm. "What's going on here? Nathan, why are you looking at me like that?" Nathan didn't say a word. He simply walked to her, throwing the blood test results onto the table. "Ava, is this true?" She froze, her face paling. For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes flickering between Nathan and me. Then she took a deep breath and let out a sigh. "I didn't want you to find out this way." Nathan's eyes burned with betrayal. So it's true then. You lied to me. You lied to me about everything. Ava's shoulders slumped as the weight of the truth crashed down on her. Yes, Nathan, it's true, but I didn't know what else to do. Liam and we couldn't stop, and I thought we could still have the life we wanted with you. Liam, the man Nathan had called his best friend, was standing just behind Ava, his face unreadable. He didn't even have the decency to look Nathan in the eye. Nathan's voice was a low growl now. How long, Ava? How long have you been lying to me? A year, she whispered. It was all out in the open now. The lies, the betrayal, the affair. Nathan's world had shattered and there was no going back. The tension in the room was palpable. I watched Nathan, who was standing across from Ava, shaking with rage and disbelief. The world I had known for years was collapsing before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to cushion the blow. Ava's confession hung in the air like a heavy fog. She had been lying to him, and worse, she had been building her own web of deceit while Nathan had been blissfully unaware, loving a child that wasn't his. Liam stood in the doorway, as if he couldn't bear to be part of this confrontation any longer, but unwilling to leave the scene of the destruction he'd helped cause. Nathan finally spoke, his voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and anger. How long were you planning to keep this from me, Ava? You think you could just keep lying and everything would stay fine? And Liam, my best friend, I trusted you, both of you. Ava's face was pale, her makeup smeared from the tears that had fallen earlier. She opened her mouth as though she were about to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, she sank onto the couch, her eyes lost in the floor. I didn't want this to happen, Nathan, she said, her voice quiet and broken. I never meant to hurt you, it just happened. Nathan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. What happened, Ava? What happened was you manipulated me, lied to me, and dragged Liam into this mess. And now I find out that the baby I've been raising is not mine, and that the man I trusted has been sleeping with my wife behind my back. I could see the anger boiling in him, the pain from the betrayal so deep it was almost unbearable. I felt my own heart breaking for him. He was my son, my flesh and blood, and all I wanted was to protect him from this world of lies. I never wanted to hurt you, Nathan, Ava repeated, but it was too little, too late. She couldn't undo the damage that had been done. Her tears flowed freely now, but Nathan wasn't moved. I stepped forward, trying to find some way to make this conversation productive. Nathan, you don't have to do this alone, I said, my voice soft but firm. You don't need to stay trapped in this lie any longer. You have a choice now, and I'll help you through it. Whatever you decide, I'm here. Nathan didn't acknowledge me. His eyes were fixed on Ava, who was sobbing on the couch. He was no longer the man who had trusted her, who had built a life around their future. Now he was just a man who had been crushed under the weight of the truth. Why, Ava? Nathan asked, his voice low. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Why didn't you let me decide what to do? Instead, you manipulated me, made me think everything was fine. And now, I don't know who you are anymore. Ava didn't answer. Her silence was her confession. She knew there was no justification for what she had done. The lies had been too numerous, too deep to cover with any explanation. Nathan turned away from her, his face pale with shock and disappointment. I can't do this. I can't stay here. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair and walked toward the door, his movements slow and deliberate, as though he were in a daze. I wanted to say something, anything to stop him, but I knew this wasn't something I could fix for him. Nathan, please, Ava pleaded, but her voice cracked under the weight of her own guilt. He stopped at the door and turned to face her. I'm not angry, Ava, I'm hurt, and that's something I can't get over. He opened the door, and without another word he walked out. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood in the doorway for a moment, not knowing what to do or what to say. Ava was crying now, her face buried in her hands. Liam had stepped back into the room, but his eyes were as empty as Nathan's had been when he'd walked out. I'm sorry, Ava whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. I never meant for this to happen. Liam said nothing, his face unreadable. He had his own guilt to shoulder, but there were no more excuses, no more lies to cover up. I turned away from them, knowing the road ahead for Nathan would be a long and painful one. I couldn't fix this for him, but I could stand by him as he pieced his life back together. The next few days were a blur. Nathan stayed at my house, and we barely spoke about what had happened. He was still processing the shock, the disbelief. He spent most of his time alone, wrestling with the decision that had to come next. Did he stay and fight for a life with Ava, despite everything, or did he walk away from the woman he had loved and trusted for so long? Ava, on the other hand, was completely consumed by guilt. She reached out to me several times, apologizing, but I couldn't bring myself to say more than a few words. Her betrayal had been so deep, and I didn't know what she could possibly say to make it right. The only person who seemed to be moving forward was Liam. He disappeared for a few days, and when he came back, it was clear that he had made his decision. He didn't speak to Nathan, and he didn't make any attempt to explain himself. He just quietly slipped away. It was clear that he didn't want any responsibility, but more importantly, he didn't want to face the consequences of what he had done. A week later, Nathan called me. "I can't do it, Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't live this lie anymore." "Then you don't have to," I replied, my heart heavy but resolute. "You don't have to do anything except heal Nathan, and I'll be here with you every step of the way." Nathan's voice broke as he said, "I don't know if I can forgive her. I don't know if I can trust anyone again." "You don't have to have all the answers right now," I said gently. "You just have to take it one day at a time. And remember, you're not alone in this. You have me, and we'll get through it together." The truth had torn his world apart, but now it was time to rebuild it. The days that followed Nathan's decision were long and filled with uncertainty. There was no clear path forward, no easy answer to the chaos that had been unleashed. Nathan was still in the midst of his own internal storm, grappling with the emotions of betrayal, loss, and confusion. But little by little, he began to rebuild. He spent most of his time with me at the house, away from the world he had once known. It wasn't easy for him to face what had happened, but the days spent in quiet conversation and solitude allowed him to start processing everything. He needed time to heal, to find his own way back to trust, and above all, to understand that the life he had imagined with Ava was gone, and he had to find a new path. The first breakthrough came when Nathan spoke about forgiveness. It wasn't directed at Ava, not yet anyway, but it was aimed at himself. "I've been so angry, Mom," he admitted one evening, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "But I've realized that holding onto this anger, it's not helping me. It's just hurting me more." It was a quiet step, but it was progress. Nathan was starting to accept that he couldn't change the past, and all he could do now was control how he moved forward. And with my support, he started to take small steps toward forgiveness, not for Ava, but for himself. Meanwhile, Ava seemed to vanish from Nathan's life. After her confession, she had tried to contact him several times, but he never responded. I knew she was sorry, but I also knew that no amount of apologies could undo the damage. She had hurt him in ways that went deeper than just an affair. It was the deception, the manipulation, the betrayal of trust that could never be repaired overnight. Ava, for her part, had fallen into a spiral of guilt and regret. The last time I saw her, she came to the house, her face pale and drawn. "I know I've destroyed everything," she said quietly, staring at the floor. "I just want him to know I'm sorry." I didn't know how to answer her. I had no words that could fix the damage. All I could say was, "You've hurt him in a way that words can't heal. He needs time, Ava, time that I don't think you're entitled to ask for." She left, tears streaming down her face, and I knew that Ava's story was over in this chapter of Nathan's life. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. As the weeks turned into months, Nathan grew stronger. He started working again, immersing himself in projects that kept his mind focused and his heart from dwelling on the past. Slowly, he began to rediscover who he was outside of the life he had built with Ava. One afternoon, a few months later, Nathan came to me with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "Mom, I think I'm ready to start over," he said. "I've been thinking a lot about what comes next. I'm ready to find something real." The sadness in his eyes had faded, replaced with a quiet determination. It wasn't a promise that he had healed completely, but it was the first sign of hope I'd seen in him since everything had unraveled. "I'm proud of you, Nathan," I said, my voice filled with pride. "You're stronger than you realize." Nathan paused, then smiled softly. "It's not about being strong, Mom. It's about being honest with myself, with others, and most importantly, with you." In the months that followed, Nathan found new love, not in someone who could replace the old, but in someone who helped him see the value of honesty, trust, and vulnerability. Her name was Sarah Chen. She wasn't perfect, but she was real, kind, and compassionate. She didn't try to fix him, she just accepted him as he was. When Nathan introduced me to Sarah for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time: peace. He was content at last. She was down to earth, intelligent, and humble, the kind of person who didn't need to manipulate or control others to feel powerful. I could see she cared about Nathan in a way that was genuine, not born from desire or desperation, but from mutual respect. One evening, as Nathan and Sarah were leaving to go out for dinner, I asked her, "What do you see in my son?" She looked at me with a warm smile and replied, "He's been through a lot, but that's what makes him so real, and that's what makes him so easy to love." I nodded, knowing that she understood something Ava never could: the simplicity of truth and the peace that came with it. As for Connor, he grew up in a household full of love, with Nathan's support from a distance. Nathan had made the difficult decision to let him go, knowing that Ava, though flawed, was still his mother. But he kept his distance, as the distance allowed him to heal. A year passed. Nathan had rebuilt his life. His relationship with Sarah grew deeper, and he began to embrace the truth that his family would never be the same. But that didn't mean it couldn't be better. He had learned to trust again, not in perfection, but in the raw, honest love that was real and unwavering. And for me, it was enough to see my son smiling again, finally free from the weight of the lies he had lived with for so long. The scars would always be there, but they no longer defined him. He was no longer a man trapped in the shadow of betrayal. Sometimes, the most beautiful revenge isn't about getting back at someone. It's about living well, loving honestly, and finding peace in the truth, no matter how painful it may be. And that's exactly what Nathan had done.